Once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Pride, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Hey, Big Blue, what do you stuff in your Ziploc bags? I was just curious, man. That was the intro.
My soap when I travel.
Your soap when you travel. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me is Big Blue. We got a great show for you guys tonight. We're going to be talking about the hearing that just happened yesterday in the Bryan Kohberger case. You know, I probably should go and check if there's any more any new docs that have came out, because I haven't looked. But Blue, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's been a busy week. I was studying. Took an important test today, so I'll find out here in a couple of days. See how it went, and then we'll see. And then I got a few more chances. So we'll see. It's not an easy test, man. Not an easy test.
I'm sure you did fine. And there does appear to be a couple of things that are in there. Something about a change of venue and some other stuff. We'll talk about those things. Let's bring up today's guest, though, from the YouTube channel called Swamp Rose. We have Rose in the building. How's it going, Rose?
Hi, how are you guys tonight?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. You know, yesterday the hearing in Bryan Kohberger's case happened. There was a lot of people watching. Did you catch it live, or did you catch the replay?
I caught it live, and I've been kind of reviewing it today because there's just so much to dissect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've caught it a couple of times. Blue, I think you might be the odd person out here that's only caught very little of it. Is that true?
That is true. I've only seen a few clips today, man. I said I was busy studying with your
Good luck on your test.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a weird testing area. Like, I mean, I understand it has to be proctored, but like man, they make you take off your glasses and they spin them around and they flip them over, and then like they have you empty your pockets. They pretty much pat you down and take pictures, and you don't get no restroom breaks and that. You lose time. Like, you only get an hour and 30 minutes to get this done. So. Go to the restroom now, kind of deal. All right. But I did have some good barbecue today. I snuck off before, good. and I went into this little mom and pop shop called Mortenson Barbecue. It's in Young Valley, and it was pretty good. I mean, I'm not a big brisket fan, but I went ahead and got the brisket plate. I mean, I like the smoked turkey better, but I keep hearing the brisket's good, so it was good. I'd probably go back next time just to try the smoked turkey. I didn't want to overstuff myself and be in the desk burping and stuff, you know, and like everybody be looking at me and the reason why they failed their test or something. So, you know.
Dude, I'd be looking at you. You're the reason I failed it. I didn't even take the test. I'm already blaming you, Blue.
I just smell like barbecue, though. That's the best one you can have. So.
You probably made everybody hungry in there, bro. So there was before we get into yesterday's trial, let's talk a little bit about what was put out there today. One is going to be the motion for change of venue. I'm not surprised by this motion. I hope they get it. I really do. I hope they get the change of venue, and I hope they move it out of that area and move it somewhere far away where there's no, if Bryan Kohberger ends up being found guilty of this, there's no chance of appeal. Big Blue, what are your thoughts on the change of venue? Are you for or against it?
No, I'm actually for it because I'm hoping that if they do change it, it would cause the case to be heard sooner. You know, they're worried about it affecting the schools, and they only have a break of the summer. They can't get a case like this big done in the summer.
Mhm.
and it's too many witnesses, too much evidence to go back and forth. So they're going to prolong it more. So I think the moving it to another place would be better.
Mhm. What about you, Rose? What are your thoughts on the change of venue? Is this something that you're for or against when it comes to the Bryan Kohberger case?
Well, I would say I'm about 60% for it. I'm more for it than against it. I have heard arguments from locals saying, well, this is a local issue. We want to keep it local. But in my personal experience, I've seen a high profile unaliving case before in a local area. And I would say it had to have a change of venue because people showed up at the courthouse to intervene with vigilante justice. And that kind of formed my opinion on things. And in certain situations, I think that it'd be better. And in this situation, it's looking like it would be received by the public much better if it was moved to Boise, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. I think one of the arguments that is out there is that they want to get it out of a rural area where the death penalty is probably more accepted versus somewhere that's a larger city or something like that, where you might fall into those that aren't in favor of it, so to speak. And so I think that's one of the things that might be one of the goals that we did hear in the trial yesterday. Defense is going to try to knock down the DP from the deal there. But transitioning onto the trial there, Rose, what was your first impression of the trial?
Oh, the hearing?
The hearing, yeah, I'm sorry, the hearing yesterday.
Well, I'll tell you, my amateur ears, maybe I just don't quite. I'll tell you, I was confused by it, and it started a kind of a firestorm in my comments of people saying that the Payne couldn't find documents, and I feel like I heard something else, and I don't know. Maybe you can clarify for me. It almost seemed like he was being elusive to the question and kept referring people back to going to get them from the evidence clerk and saying, we've given you everything. We're just not going to guide you to where it is. And it almost reminded me of a politician in front of Congress when you ask them for a stat or like how many, you ask them for a specific stat. And even though they should be required to say it right there and give you the information, they always say, I got to check. And that's probably something they do to protect themselves. But that's what that's the impression that it laid on me when I watched that happening.
Right. Yeah. To me, that wasn't the thought that I had. I think there was, when it comes to the evidence, and me and Blue have discussed this in length and for a long time here. And what I was able to tell out of this trial is that, this hearing was that a lot of people owe me a lot of apologies. If somebody can go back and find the video, I think I'm with Truth and Transparency, where she asked me, when do you think that Bryan Kohberger became a suspect? And I said December 20th. I said that months ago. If those that have been watching this, everything that I have said up to this point has been 100% accurate. And it made me kind of chuckle a little bit because I was like, I told you guys. And everybody in that live chat was like, or even in the comment section, they're like, no, they knew him November 25th. And I was like, no, that's when the WSU officer found his vehicle. But I guarantee you he was looking at multiple vehicles, not just one. And that was the only, that was the time he may have came across it. That doesn't mean that's the time that information got to Sergeant or to Corporal Payne. We don't know when that information got there. Now, I told everybody that December 19th is when the IGG came back. And then that's when December 20th is when everything, like I mentioned, that's when he became the suspect. And sure enough, December 20th is when Corporal Payne contacts WSU officer. And, that's when they start getting the ball rolling. The warrants start December 23rd. So every single thing happened after then. So like I said, the IGG was the thing that pointed, the law enforcement towards Bryan Kohberger. And I think that the defense in this case is really trying hard to prove that point. And I think that's why they're asking for timing and stuff like that in subpoenas, is because they want to prove that that's what pointed them towards Bryan Kohberger. and not just mere chance gotten, his information from a WSU officer. And if they can, I guess their thought process is if they can prove that, then that means they lied when they did the affidavit by saying that, this guy, this is how they found out who he was, when in reality it was through the IGG, and they want to get the grand jury thing thrown out. So to me, I think that's what a lot of it kind of boiled down to when it came to that stuff. When it came to what information and evidence was there, and like I just kind of go in a big old circle there. Me and Blue had talked about it. I wouldn't, and we had a defense attorney on as well. It wasn't going to be a surprise to any of us if the prosecution said, all right, well, here's all the video, here's everything we have. Here's the important information that we have. This is the information that we're using against your client. And this is everything else that you can go through at your leisure. And she wants a breakdown of where everything's at, because she doesn't want to go and physically find them herself. But that's the sense I got. Does that make sense to you guys? Does that make sense to you, Rose?
Yes, I got the same impression. But the one thing that I would ask you, and you could probably explain this to me. So if they're trying to prove that they were tipped off by the IGG, is that what they mean by an informant?
Yeah,
Because
that's the informant.
Informant testimony. Okay, I thought when they said witness testimony, I didn't know if that meant an actual person.
No, the informants are the relatives of Bryan Kohberger who had entered into whatever database it was. I'm going to call it Ancestry, but I know it's not Ancestry. I think it's like Xana Tree or something. I don't know what it's called. And through that process, whoever opted in, which I believe most people do, I think it's one of those things you have to check yes for, if you want to get into. And they use that database to determine, the relatives of Bryan Kohberger, and that's how they pointed at him. But because the Othram or the FBI, they don't go and they actually take Bryan Kohberger's DNA off of his cheek, and they don't go and take the DNA that was found off of the sheath and compare it one for one. It's just a hypothesis, a theory. It's just, hey, we think it's Bryan Kohberger because his relatives all match up to this DNA on the sheath. And you have to go build your case and get probable cause and get a warrant for his DNA in efforts to match it so that you can use that in trial. But the stuff that they use in the IGG isn't usable. It's inadmissible. But I feel that Ann Taylor wants to get the IGG put in solely so she can try to make it seem like law enforcement lied. When they alluded to the way they built the case was that, they found the 2015 Elantra. They looked at the driver's license, looked at the phone number, and how they ended up, dotting the lines there. And they're trying to get away from ever mentioning the IGG. It's kind of obvious, in my opinion, for what both sides are trying to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do agree. I do think that, she's been fighting for it for a while since we first got, the grand jury was able to use it.
Yeah.
She's been trying to fight for the info, who discovered it, and she still wants the FBI info, which, disappeared. And they're going to show their work.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how, I didn't get to hear much of the case of the IGG part. I saw most of the case.
The IGG part today was closed, so they didn't talk about it, but they've been bringing up the IGG. And I've been wondering this entire time, why are they bringing up something inadmissible that wasn't in favor of their client? It'd be one thing if the IGG pointed at somebody else and then they still went after Bryan Kohberger. That means it was inaccurate. That means it was done wrong. Then you would want to bring it up like, hey, this thing pointed at Brian Crowstern. I don't know, somebody random, right? Not Kohberger, not this guy, somebody else. So this is why we want this entered into evidence. But it didn't. It pointed at their client. And so, I've been wondering why fight so hard for that. And today, in listening to their arguments at the end, as far as the timing and when things happen, I had known that they had wanted the timing in which it was, so they can prove that the IgG is what actually pointed them to Bryan Kohberger. But what I didn't know was the argument behind it, or what the stance was. And when they said that deceptive practice on the affidavit, that meant that what they're trying to say is it wasn't this white Elantra that the WSU officers found that pointed them towards Bryan Kohberger. It was the IgG. And these guys aren't saying that in their probable cause affidavit, so they're lying. And I think they're trying to get that thrown out, or get it thrown out that way, which, and it's kind of, I mean, even if that were to happen, that doesn't stop the state from retrying him and going a different route. So I don't know. What do you think, Rose? What do you think about all that?
Well, so I don't know. I have a couple questions though for you guys, maybe that you could clarify for me, because you do have a background. So I've heard a lot of talking that things that were said in this hearing would qualify for, and this is my first time knowing the term, and I looked it up before I came on, a Frank's hearing. And that seems to be something that's asked for if there was a deceptive practice, or if somebody didn't, if somebody had lack of knowledge or did the procedures wrong. And so when people were talking about that, are they talking about that because Payne didn't know how to do the casting, or they're saying he did it improperly?
No, I just said that. So it's because they want to prove that the state found Kohberger a different way than what they claimed in their affidavit, thus invalidating the affidavit.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it had, because they had, right before they were discussing that, they had talked about he was potentially in another area in the casting. And
that's what they said before, but I've watched this a couple of times. I actually have it broken down and segmented. I never heard anything saying where he was. They never said that he was a specific place or a specific time. Cyray didn't say that, oh, he wasn't there, he was at the Wawa Park. What they kept arguing was, and I'm nowhere near a cell phone expert. I don't know. In fact, I did contact some people though, so I'm going to try to get one on. But I don't know a lot of that aspect of it, and so that I try to stay away from a lot of it. But it just kind of seemed that there was nothing there that pointed him somewhere else, and it seemed like the issues that they were having was like missing information. And my question is that missing information because his phone is not connected to the network? He mentioned something about that the instrument was on, and I'm assuming he's meaning the phone, but it wasn't registering to AT&T. And so my initial thought was a Faraday cage, or I think it's called Faraday or Faraday bag. Are you familiar with one of those?
Yeah, like a token pouch, like a signal blocking pouch, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that would have a similar effect, because we would know, or law enforcement would know, if his phone was turned off, if it was the battery died, or if it was out of reception, right? And because if he's going to turn the phone off, you have to manually do that. There's going to be a record of all that information. And so for him to say the instrument was on but not reporting to the network, I'm like, well, I mean, I think there's a pretty simple answer there. If he put it, I mean, you don't even have to have like one of these black bags, I think is what they call them, or dark bags is what they're called on Amazon. You can actually go get like a Ruffles bag of potato chips, the ones that have the aluminum inside of it. If you put your phone in there and close that up, your GPS, everything is gone. So that was one of the things that I thought. And to be honest with you, I thought the defense screwed up pretty bad. Not in this trial, but I think Kohberger screwed up by not going to trial earlier. If he wouldn't have waived his speedy rights trial, all this question marks would have been there. And I think that could have made some question about reasonable doubt. And I was talking to Jeff H during the trial, and I was telling him, I was like, man, it sounds like the defense is trying to tell the prosecution what to do to make a stronger case, because the prosecution is not done collecting evidence. They haven't set a trial. They haven't done any of those things. And even Cy Ray said that this is fixable. And so I was like, man, why point this out now? And then at the end, the prosecution said that at the request of the defense, there was additional transfer DNA work done. Now, what work do we think that is? I'm going to assume, it's a big assumption, but this was unknown three DNAs that were found outside the house that the defense had made a big deal about. Now, had they waited on that information, I think that would have been powerful. But now it seems like the state has figured out who that is. And if it ends up being cleared, then that doesn't look good for Kohberger, does it? What do you think?
Yeah, because they would lose their probable cause. Not the probable cause. They would lose their misleading information.
Right. I mean,
it could be somebody else because they don't know what DNA things are, and then if they had the time to clear them now and find the people,
exactly,
and then they can't use that excuse no more.
Exactly. And then his, Cy Ray even said, hey, this is fixable. And he said, once we get all this other stuff done, I have the right to change my mind. And it could very well look bad on Bryan Kohberger. In fact, Cy Ray didn't seem very comfortable testifying, in my opinion, for the defense, especially making statements like that, to the point where Ann Taylor was like, fair enough. And so, I mean, I think there's some question marks and there's some questions. And at first I thought, this doesn't look so great to the prosecution, but watching it back a few times, I think they're giving him a blueprint on how to convict this guy with a stronger case. What do you think? What do you think, Rose?
Well, I think two things you said. So I really thought you hit the nail on the head as far as my opinion is concerned too. So the right to speedy trial, I always thought that would have been is probably BK's best bet, because there's
me too.
And now that you're saying the part about the two unknown DNAs, I guess I didn't think of that before. Those results wouldn't have been in, and that would have created quite a bit of reasonable doubt. And that's another reason why a speedy trial would have played in his favor, I would imagine, because he's going to have appeal anyway. But the other thing that I really want to go back to that you said was when you started talking about the token pouches or the signal blocking pouches, and they can be very sophisticated, they can be expensive, or they can be something homemade, like you were saying. In general, though, you do need a really strong one to block that signal. But that's one way you can spoof your phone, but there's probably about 6 different ways you can do it. And what I think of is there are GPS spoofing apps. So I was listening to Cy Ray, and I was really intently listening because I've been waiting for this metadata analysis. This is what I've always, I really sunk my teeth into in this case. And Cy Ray said that it was completely detached from the metadata. It was only using the casting of the towers. And that kind of alarmed me, because I know that you can actually download a GPS spoofing app. So if you don't have the forensic download of the phone, how do you know that it authentically was bouncing off certain towers or didn't have a signal? Because it doesn't, if you don't have the metadata, you don't, it has magnetometers and accelerometers. So it tells you how fast you go, what way you turned, what speed you were going. So even if you aren't connected to a tower or even GPS, it's accurate enough to know, 1, it's you holding the phone. You have your own blueprint when you hold it. And 2, it can kind of tell you where you are if you have a starting point or an end point. So I thought it was a red flag for me that there's no analysis of the metadata, but I also am just an amateur too. So I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
I was gonna say because that's one of the things that when I try to research a little bit is some of the spin-offs that I'm seeing, like from news places, that this guy actually did a good job for the defense, for Bryan's team. So I'm like, okay, but there's still that time where he don't know where he was. Nobody does.
Yeah.
They couldn't track them, and if the phone's off, it would show either getting turned off and then a reboot. I had to do that today, and when my phone turned back on, it would just cram. All this information came in at one time. I had to set it down, let it process itself. So it would show that if he did that in the documents when they ask AT&T for the information on the phone, or when they download the information on the phone. I mean, I think we all have some of the big carriers around here, and a lot of people are fighting what's going to happen pretty soon. It's coming up next week, where I think now Samsung is joining the group where now you can be tracked, like Find My iPhone, and it's going to do that now. So, I keep getting messages on my phone that keep saying, coming soon, you'll be able to track your phone and track your location. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure they already do it, but it's going to be on a certain network. I wonder if he was already on that network, depending on what phone he has.
Right. I don't know, man. I don't know. But, when it comes to the other thing, what they said was, and this is what the prosecution stated also afterwards. So the whole thing was that there was a diagram, right? There was a map. And on this map, he said that there was something that was one size near the N in Pullman, and another tower that was another size, which told him that was done by a certain program where you needed the advanced, I don't even know what they're called, advanced locations. I'm just going to call it that. And that's the only way you can do that. Now, he then also said that if you put it in default, that all you have to do is bring in the AT&T CDR records and put them in there because they have their own locations on them, and it could populate the map. And that's exactly what the officer said last time, Mari. He said that it was on default, and this is exactly what they testified again afterwards, that's how they put it out there, and that they have yet to put out this advanced, whatever the case may be, because they don't have those records. They don't exist. Now, maybe perhaps they did something wrong. Maybe they input those records into the wrong format, and maybe that's why he's saying it's inaccurate. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the tech or how it works. But the other thing I was wondering is if the name Pullman in the imagery causes some of the images behind it to change size, and if it does, could that be a reason why it's not the same size, and it also be the ones that he said it was? But in the end, the defense's witness said that this is fixable. Even if they did do it wrong, it's fixable, and they have the original data that Nick Balance, who he testified in trial in a couple of cases, one that just got a guilty verdict today, in Chad Daybell. So I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what Nick Balance's testimony to what Cy Ray had said and his response to it, as far as those things. You know what I mean? What do you think about that, Rose?
Yeah, I agree, and actually that brings up a question that one of you might have the answer to, which is when they talk about Nick. Both Cy mentioned Nick. It sounded like he was on a first name basis with him, so it sounds like he knows, or maybe potentially he knows what his thoughts on it. But also they talked about Nick emailing Payne, and Payne using the information that was gathered there to write up the route that BK took on the PCA. So my question is it typical when the when the defense is in the discovery phase, if their FBI is involved in a partnership for developing the case, is it typical for them to audit or ask for the emails back and forth with the FBI and the local office, or is this abnormal?
I think it's not abnormal. I think it's typical. When I was starting off in law enforcement, that's one thing that they taught us, like, hey, Don't text anything on your personal stuff, on anything or your phone. You get a work phone, leave everything on work there, because if you say or text or write a note on your phone on anything, then it can be used and the defense will have access to all your stuff, including things that really don't have relevance in anything. You know what I mean? But it's your personal life. So, yeah, it's not uncommon. I don't think.
That makes sense.
But transitioning to the other exculpatory evidence that they claim they have, they said that there was no footage of Bryan Kohberger traveling out of Moscow on 95, and I believe both Payne had testified that there are multiple routes to get to where he was, and that he didn't come back on until 448, and he was closer to Genesee, which I thought it was closer to Blaine, which is what he had said. But in the probable cause affidavit, but in his testimony, he said it was closer to Genesee. So down here now, and that he said that they couldn't find any cameras that show him going this route or coming down on 95. I get that, and here's the Monday machine. Where is it at? Right here, Monday machine. This is the machine shop, and this is the shop that Ann Taylor is saying it's exculpatory because he's not passing here. However, there's another route. Now, before I found out that the cameras, the traffic cams, don't save, I assumed that when Payne said that he thinks that he could have gone this direction towards Pullman, I assumed that was because they had access to this camera and he avoided this camera. So what I did was I marked a route that goes around this intersection to get onto I-95 and surpass every single camera. There is not one camera on this road, and I went through every single one. I was doing that before we got on the show. I went through every single plot on like this. And if anybody finds something there, let me know. But there is a lot of this. So when she's saying, oh man, they have no video evidence of him traveling, yeah, there's nothing there. And I think that, is another indication of planning. At the end of the day, somebody committed this murder, and the person that committed the murders didn't just disappear into a vortex. And you know what I mean? They had to have left some different direction, and they don't have any cameras saying which way. Well, here's a way that doesn't have cameras. Now, the first camera that pops up.
We'd be talking about it on here anyway. So
yeah. Yeah. The first camera that pops up on this entire route is when he's already into Washington, heading back northbound towards Pullman. And this is the first camera that is pointing towards the road. Right there. And that's if they are cameras. I can't tell. I'm assuming they are. So obviously there's not going to be anything on 95 facing or going southbound. So, I mean, they're just throwing this exculpatory word out for everything, and which makes me question how much of it really is exculpatory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to say, man, they must not have much time on it because there's no fence around all those work trucks. Mm-hmm. Over here in Texas, there'd be a fence around every work truck company like that because you steal up parts from them.
Right. Let's see.
Yeah, and I thought that I was thinking about the traffic cameras too, because I know there are some potential sightings on traffic cameras, not in that area on I-95, but talking about the whole interaction regarding the Ring doorbells on it too. That was pretty interesting, I thought, on the Indian Hill Road. And I couldn't tell, I don't know if it's me or not, I couldn't tell if he was trying to just not give the information if they had done a video casing, or if he was just answering very specific questions, but it sounded as if they only asked one specific house for footage on that particular street, or one house offered it, and that they didn't case out other houses. Do you think that'd be true if they were collecting?
No, that's not exactly what he said. So what they asked was, were you a part of the video canvassing? And he said, no, I was not a part of the video canvassing. And they asked who was, and then they asked about this specific, she asked about this specific piece of evidence here. And he had said that it was part of the video canvassing. Somebody went and knocked on the door, and they were able to they made contact with him. They were able to gather that through there, but he doesn't know how they gathered it or how they had made contact. He was just only aware that it was done through the video canvassing that they were doing. But no, I think they mentioned several Ring cameras and stuff like that from video canvassing. So no, it wasn't the only one. But yeah, so for me, I don't see the exculpatory part. Even if what he's saying, even with Cy Ray, when he said that, they don't have him in the house, but they have him in the neighborhood. Now, is that the night of the murders? Because if that's the night of the murders, then his story's changing, don't you think? Wasn't it that he wasn't in Moscow, that he was south and southwest of Moscow? Maybe I understood that wrong. I could be wrong.
I can't answer that one because I didn't hear that part.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I did catch a little bit was they're gonna have more, I guess, witnesses next week, right? And they're talking about the same thing about the cat and about the phone pings.
Yeah.
I thought this guy was the expert. What are they bringing the other guys on for?
I think it's about the videos, and I think they wanted to get the cast. I think is Nick Balance. I think that's going to be the end up being the guy. Hold on one second. And so let me pull this off to the side. Steelers fan, if you can hear me, can you close the garage door? My mechanic is done, and so I hope she can hear. If not, when she comes back, somebody let her know to close my garage door. Well, anyway, yeah. So the fact that his phone doesn't put him there the night of the murders, I mean, that's the same thing that the probable cause affidavit says. They don't put him there either. And so, they were looking at camera footage here in this area and saying that because there's no camera footage here of the car going south on 95, that's exculpatory, but there's other routes. I mean, it's clearly there's other routes. It's going to be easily arguable. I mean, this is an easy argument to lose for her. Like she's basically saying this is the only route to get there, and clearly there's this one. So
let me ask you a question. Why didn't they call someone to rebuttal her testimony, his side's testimony, or give a better explanation? Is it just because they don't want to try the case right now in a hearing? Or I just don't understand why a second witness would have been called, or even follow-up questions to what side.
I asked another officer that, and I said, hey, were you surprised that they didn't, rebuttal or cross-examine? He said, no, I'm glad they didn't. Because the only thing you really can do there by saying too much is give them too much information you clearly don't want to give them. And so I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. And the other thing is too, he's an expert. So the only way you can probably battle that guy is with another expert. And so that's why I want to hear what Nick Balance has to say. And it sounded like, and according to him, he even said it himself, that he knows him and that he's well trained and he knows what he's doing. So we'll see. I think, and which brings up the next question. I think they had a concern about the speed in which the warrants came in for the pings. And I thought it was kind of weird, or not weird, but like she said that those things coming in on the same day was odd. And I think even Cy Ray testified that it's extremely rare. I'm not sure if he was aware that Nick Balance, the person that was doing this with him, who is, as he said himself, was highly trained, was there at Moscow with Corporal Payne during this time. And I believe she had mentioned that the second warrant went out at 4:45 p.m. So that's in the afternoon. And he said that somebody who's capable of completing this can do it in 3 hours. So I don't understand where the mix-up is there. What do you think about that, Rose?
Well, I'm actually glad you broke it down like that, because I was concerned about what she was saying. But what I heard Sai say, if I wasn't mistaken, was that he was saying, he didn't say it was impossible. He just said that it is, it's just something that wouldn't be typical. And what you just said was something I didn't realize, was that the FBI, or Nick from the FBI, was actually at their office. I assumed they would have been sending it out to the FBI office and having it back. So that makes a little bit more sense why it could actually be received same day. It's funny, little things like that you don't get told because there is no cross-examination of the expert. So I'm glad you pointed that out. So and on the same note, I remember they talked about vehicle type and vehicle versus vehicle year for the identification. And that was another one that I wanted to ask you guys about tonight too. Did it sound like to you that they were suggesting a vehicle type reminiscent of this segment of cars versus a year, or was it just the way he was saying it?
Blue, I'll let you answer. Well, Blue, did you hear that? Do you know what that means to give an answer?
I did not hear that part, so I can't answer. Sorry. But, go ahead.
So what was said was, what Payne said was that the pictures were given to the FBI expert, and the FBI expert told them to look for a vehicle that is similar to a 2011 to a 2013 Hyundai Elantra. And so they were looking for other cars, not just 2011 to 2013 Elantras. They were looking for cars that match that type of vehicle. And there's evidence of that by the mere fact that they went out and looked for Bryan Kohberger's car, it being a 2015, on November 25th. Now we know that the call between Payne and the officer at WSU didn't happen until December 20th after the IGG came in. Then that means that that collection on November 25th was a part of a collection of multiple vehicles that matched the description that they were looking for, which also included Bryan Kohberger. So even before they had Bryan Kohberger's name and or him as a prime suspect, they weren't excluding his vehicle type and year as being a possible vehicle in the crime. And so once they found out, and this is my, connecting the dots, once they found out that Bryan Kohberger was their guy, I'm pretty positive that they were like, all right, where's this guy from? He's from Pullman. Let's go start looking at those Pullman cameras and see if we see this guy leaving there, because if he committed this crime, he would have had to have left Pullman eventually, right? So then they go and check all those cameras out there, and sure enough, he's leaving Pullman. And that's when they probably also figure like, all right, this is definitely a 2015, which is why in the probable cause affidavit, there's no question about the Elantra and Pullman. They say 2014 to 2016 Elantra. And what I'm thinking happened was they're like, all right, Mr. Expert, can you exclude a 2015 Elantra from what you're seeing here? It really doesn't matter what they thought in the beginning. I mean, in the beginning, they thought it was a 2019 Nissan Sentra. What it matters is, can you exclude the vehicle or not? If you go in there and if you can find something that's exclusive to a 2013, and you can say, hey, this is not a 2013, or this is not the vehicle, you can exclude it, then that's what matters at the end of the day. Why they want to know so bad about it is because if that finding didn't happen until after the IGG, they can say that the entire case based on the IGG, and which is what they're trying to say, which to a certain extent, that's how they got him. But that doesn't mean that you can do anything with it. You can't build a case with something that's not inadmissible. Get what I'm saying? Or something that's not admissible in court. You can't build a case on that. And so
I heard you say one time it was kind of like the way they use a lie detector test. It's similar to this standard. Like it's not evidence, but it's like a tip or a anonymous tip or something like that. Is that
right? Right. Well, I mean, the reason I use a lie detector test is not so much that it's not evidence, is that it's both things are inadmissible in court. Both things don't show any real evidence, and the reason being is because if you lie on a lie detector test, that doesn't really necessarily mean you're lying. It just means you're sweaty, you got nervous, you moved a little bit during one of the questions. Those things aren't 100% accurate. Neither is the IgG, which is why you need the STR profile match to confirm it, and that's why the STR profile match is what is used in cases. That's why it is being used here. At the end of the day, Bryan Kohberger's dad's trash was pulled legally, and the STR profile that was created from the knife sheath was made before the IgG was ever brought up. So the IgG cannot take out the SNP profile cannot take out the STR profile, and so it's just a big circle. But like I said, they're trying to prove that they lied somehow in the affidavit by not putting in or including the IgG, thus voiding the affidavit and supposedly letting him go or walk. But that's not going to happen. Not off of that, that's for sure. You know what I mean? Can't get STR without the IgG. That's completely backwards. The STR profile is what's created, and then you get the IgG. In fact, I actually spoke with Gabriela Vargas. In fact, you know what? Maybe I'll play that video because I say one more time for everybody as loud as you can, way in the back for those that don't hear. And then Ms. Vargas goes, the STR profile has nothing to do with the SNP profile. I can play it again. I'll find it before we leave the show. Maybe we'll end it off that way because it was a pretty big mic drop moment for myself when I was able to get the defense's witness to agree to what I was saying.
I remember that show. I did see that. I saw something else in the chat, since you're just bringing up things there that I thought was interesting. Somebody brought up the 22,000 white elantras in the area. And I think that statistic is interesting when you look at it, because it's an average. It's an average per capita. And you have to think of the type of car that would be there. So would there be 22,000 people who would prefer an Elantra in that area? And I used to watch Get a Clue before he went off air, and he actually broke it down. He came to find out when he broke it down on his channel, there was probably less than 600 white Elantras in that county or area where they originally thought there might be 22,000. And that makes it a little bit more placing the car in the area statistically. Yeah, it makes it a little more probable if you were to catch a white car or a white Elantra on camera. Anyway, I just thought I'd talk about that because I saw that going through chat too.
And if the defense is arguing it, right, it's probably because they feel that something is in their interest, correct? And so if they don't, which means that there's probably a lot of stuff. We've heard a lot of evidence. There's a lot of stuff they're not arguing. Obviously, if there was things that were pretty concrete and airtight, they wouldn't be bringing it up right now and putting it out there for everybody to hear. They're only going to want things done, obviously, very close to the vest there. And the reason why I say that is because we all know that there was a tire, the CSI guys were out there picking up tire tracks and pieces of tire from the floor. I was recently looking back at the Linda Lane footage, and there's a time where when Bryan Kohberger pulls in and he stops in front of 507 Queen for about 12 seconds, he pops it in reverse and then goes back towards the apartment complex and turns the wheel to go back the direction that he went. When he pops it back in drive, he turns the wheel all the way to the left so that he can turn. Now, when he turns the wheel, he does that prior to the vehicle moving. When you do that on a vehicle and asphalt, it'll leave a lot of tire residue and tire impression. They didn't get Bryan's car until after his arrest, so we wouldn't know if any of those things matched up. But I'm curious if they could. And the good thing about that Linda Lane footage is there is a documented video evidence of the vehicle turning the wheel and the location more or less of where that wheel was turned. So when you go out to that parking lot and you're looking for those type of things on the ground, you can pinpoint which one it was. And so you can probably put him there. And that's something we're not going to hear now, but I'm fairly positive we'll probably hear about that later. What do you think about that, Rose?
Well, Daniel, are you talking about the actual like forensics of the rubber of the tire, or are you talking about the imprint of the tire? Interesting.
No. The actual forensics of the compound of the tire.
That would be a huge piece of evidence. I know as a juror, it would be it'd be pivotal for me. But I mean, just a tire print in general, I know those can be sometimes really accurate as well. And I thought I saw one piece of evidence. I'm not sure. Yeah, I did see a piece of evidence of them measuring a tire mark. I also saw them measuring a four-wheeler mark. Anyway, so yeah, I it would be amazing if that type of evidence was there, and I think it would take a lot of doubt away.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely would. Micro Kimmy says if they have a problem with the IgG, they can try that case on its own, but the buccal swab matches. IgG isn't needed any longer, and that's one of the other things that makes sense, and one of the things that I've also said, like, yeah. And you know, I talked to Steve from True Crime Web, and he's a former CSI guy, and I made sure to talk to him, and he was telling me, yeah, I mean, you can probably tell a lot about the tires, and you can tell if they came from the same tire or not. And the other thing too, let's just say, because I haven't gotten this verse into it, I'm gonna ask, but if they can get that tire and they can match it to Bryan Kohberger's, right? Now, Bryan Kohberger moved from Pennsylvania. So I'm wondering if those tires that he has on his car were from a group that were manufactured out of the same rubber, right? There would probably be like a set of tires that would all match. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Now, if he purchased those in the Pennsylvania area, which is across the country, that would probably limit the amount of those tires being on the other side as well, thus increasing the likelihood of that being Bryan Kohberger in that area.
You know, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, it would make it statistically a more impressive piece of evidence just because the vehicle came from halfway across the country. I didn't even think about that. The batch would be totally different than anything out in the West Coast. That's a good thought.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
and I know somebody said they think that maybe he changed his tires, and that's possible. I know that he went to a shop to get maintenance work done, but that shop was located, and that was in Pennsylvania, and they arrested him within 2 weeks of him being in Pennsylvania. So I'm hoping if that ends up being the case, that they were able to track that down to that shop. So, and supposedly that shop is what, I don't know how true it is one of those Reddit things, so who knows? But there is a shop there that apparently Bryan Kohberger went and had oil change or something done, and that at that shop, him and his dad had mentioned to the mechanic something about that the reason they took a trip more southern towards Pennsylvania versus the more logical trip was because of a weather storm, which does make sense for the time and things of that nature, but I'm not entirely sure if that's 100% accurate.
I forgot about that. And then you changed it out for seasonal tires. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And so if that is true, I mean, if they were there at that place, they can still, you know, track it down to him by being able to pull those tires from there. Again, if Bryan Kohberger's getting rid of the tires because he committed a mass murder or quadruple homicide, and you know, he went across country and he's wanting to get rid of his tires just for that, unless he caused damage to them, they're probably going to be in okay, you know, shape. So I don't know if the tire shop's necessarily going to get rid of them right away. So
you could have had them. Oh, that's yeah.
So
that's the next question I was going to have is what is the likelihood that the tire didn't get just thrown into a pie? You know, I don't know. After a week.
Right. I mean, it could. And even if it gets sent out somewhere, those things happen like on once in a month basis and things like that. So it's very well possible that tire could have gotten burnt up by now. And it's very well possible that it still was on the Elantra when they picked up the car. So I don't know. That's one thing to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories out there that drive you nuts. You follow them all the way down the rabbit hole. But,
yeah.
You know, I think one of the things that I saw was the footage of him not going through Moscow. It's not there no more. That it was lost. I only caught part of that. What were they meaning by that? Is it because the camera's only saved for so long?
Wait, run that by me again, Blue. You were mumbling a little bit. What?
It said that on one of the reports I saw, it said that the prosecution, I guess, couldn't prove that he was driving down that lane, down that road, because there was no camera footage, right?
Right. That
when he was entering Moscow, that there's supposed to be a camera there, and it was lost somehow.
Yeah, so they said that they wanted the camera for Red Star Coffee Shop. So this is Red Star Coffee Shop. Now, what the state is saying is that basically we have better footage of this street from multiple places along this street, and so they say they have it. It's just in a green thumbnail. And even Ann Taylor said, "Is it in a green thumbnail in that she has access to?" And he said, "Yeah." And he's like, well, then I got to go through thousands of hours of all this crap. So she's just complaining because she doesn't know exactly where it's at. But they are using other, probably better angles of the vehicle other than this one. So it's not, it'd be one thing if it was like down here in the middle of nowhere or something, right? And there's no other cameras to say, all right, you know what, that vehicle just didn't appear out of nowhere, right? You know, that it's further down here or on this side of the street, if it's left or east or west of that camera. So it's not necessarily as important. I don't really think it's exculpatory at all whatsoever. And the mere fact that Ann Taylor can't find it isn't evidence of innocence. She just needs to go and look for it. You know what I mean? And
That was my takeaway too. I really felt like and again, maybe just a regular person's perspective, it sounded like she was saying this is just an impossible task for me to find all this information, and that and I felt like his answer is saying wasn't saying that he lost the information. He's saying he didn't know where it was because he just doesn't know off the top of his head. You have to go back to the person in charge of the evidence, the custodian.
Right.
Evidence.
Right. Right. Nobody was saying it didn't exist. They don't know where it's at. Like, hey, where's this at? I don't know. It's in evidence. Go find it.
It's just the way, I guess, you know how the news flips things. I mean, we know how the news flips things. But I just thought, I was like, man, I never heard that till I missed the last few days. So,
but you know, going real quick back to the Elantra and the 2013 and the style. It makes sense when they put out a stock photo of a 2013 Elantra. Now that we know that they were looking for vehicles like this, not necessarily this vehicle, they were looking for vehicles like a 2013 Elantra. I mean, with everything else that they're saying, and like I said, the biggest clue that they were looking for vehicles like it is the fact that they found Bryan Kohberger's vehicle November 25th. That was before the IGG came back. So they had his vehicle in a list of other vehicles that they considered were similar or like the suspect's vehicle. I think it would be different if they didn't go and look at his car until after the IGG came back. I think that would have been maybe a little bit more problematic. What do you think, Swamp?
I think I'm going to have to go back and listen for myself, but that makes sense now that they're referencing the 25th. And that was the date excuse me, that they hadn't had the IGG back by the 25th. Yeah. And so if they had discovered something or something brought them to BK, they have documented, it really is cut and dry that wasn't the ultimate thing that led them to BK, just one of those things that solidified that we're in the right direction here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you that I took that same takeaway.
Yeah, I just, like I said, at the end of this, I mean, I went through everything, and when I first saw this, I was like, all right, you know, this is not necessarily tough for the prosecution, but you know, they're throwing out a lot of things like exculpatory, possible other suspect theories, and we know what that is. That's the unidentified male DNAs, and like I said, they play their card too early. Like I don't know if you guys have ever seen Fast and the Furious, the very first one, but there's a scene where Jesse's in his Jetta and he's racing the S2000 and he hits the NOS, and then the S2000 guy, Cameron Tran, I think is what his name was, goes, too soon, Junior, and then hits the Nas and kicks his butt. That's exactly how this felt. And I was like, man, why are you doing this now? Like, if you brought up these questions during trial, like actual trial, and you don't, and there's no way that the prosecution can fix any of these things, or even if it's not accurate, let's just say that if Cyray is mistaken for some reason, and Nick Balance comes in here and explains it, you know, if that ends up being the case, then we're never really going to ever hear Cy's testimony in actual trial. He's not, this is just going to be in this hearing. And so, you know, we're going to end up hearing both sides of it. And if they came in with something like this there, I think there might be some room for reasonable doubt, but they're giving the prosecution every opportunity to fix any mistake that they made. I don't understand. I don't know. I don't get it.
You can look at it that way, but that's what's happening. And I don't know, maybe it's AT is trying to create enough reasonable doubt to get this frank hearing. I don't know. When do we find out if they're going to have the frank hearing? There was so much talk about it yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, they talked about suppression hearing. You can talk about all these hearings. There's a difference between talking about it, doing them, and then winning them. And so I don't know. They were spewing out a bunch of things that they were going to be wanting to do, and then they also said, well, you know, if we get certain things, then maybe we don't have to suppress so much, or we don't have to do so much. So basically leaving it open for the fact that if they do it right, then they're not going to argue. And that's what it sounded like to me. Like, hey, if you guys end up doing this right and show that, you know, Bryan Kohberger actually kind of did do this, then well, we got nothing to show. I mean, that's exactly what she said. And I mean, I don't know. I like I said, it's one thing to ask and say and win. It's another thing to win and do and all this other stuff. So we'll see. You know, time will come when those things happen. But what do you think?
I just want to jump in real quick. Sorry, I gotta get to going, so I gotta work tonight. But thank you for coming on to the show. I gotta go, guys. Yeah, I gotta work till 8 in the morning. So see y'all next time, guys.
Yeah,
see you next time,
good luck on your test.
Thank you. All right, see you next time. Talk to you later, Dan.
Sounds good, man. Talk to you later. Mikey S says it's way out there. They also adjusted the year late. What's way out there? Oh, and that they adjusted the year late. I mean, yeah, but does it matter as long as it doesn't exclude? Like, it's one thing if, and I'm assuming you're talking about the car. It really don't matter if you can look at it I mean, it'd be one thing if Ann Taylor has an expert and comes up and says, you know what? No, that isn't a 2013 Elantra. There's no doubt about it. But they're not doing that. They're not saying that. They're not saying that based on the information that they have that this is a 2013 Elantra. You know, I would think that would be one of the biggest things that they would be bringing up right now, instead of all this IGG and stuff like that. You know, they exist. $5 says it's a tough month for me, but of course we certainly all value 3 quality minds at work here. Impressive and promising team. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So Mikey's comment too, I would say I agree with you, because that has always brought up some sort of reasonable doubt, or doubt that we talk about a lot on our channels, is why did they come out with that date and then revise it? And oftentimes people will speculate it was revised to fit Bryan's car. But when you say, when they give that testimony, again, something that would have been effective at trial maybe was taken away in this hearing, because then they tell us, well, that's not the context of how we released the initial dates. The context of that was to say, we're looking for a car similar to this Elantra of these years. And then if you think back in retrospect of all the types of sedans, and we come out with things like Chrysler 300s and Teslas and like older model Celicas that look like that, they were pretty accurate when they did come out with the exact brand and make and very similar years. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Just like you said, it does feel sometimes she's playing these things a little bit prematurely. When if she brought that up at trial, it could, people have time to digest it now and break it down. And so,
yeah. And then, and the prosecution does too. And like I said, like those were the words that came out of my mouth, was like, too soon. Like, this is too soon. Like, if you had all this and these guys can't finish their stuff yet, all right, if you would have gone to trial and not waived your speedy trial thing and would have gone back then, I think that would have been a much higher chance of him walking.
oh,
I think that was his best opportunity. I think he blew it, because that's one of the things that's what you battle, right? Is, all right, you keep your speedy trial. That makes the prosecution have to present their case even if they're not ready. And if they're not ready, that's beneficial for the defense. But, if they got their stuff together and you go to trial early, if you lose, and you lose, you know what I mean? And so him, I don't know, contemplating that decision and then in the end waiving it, I don't know if that's a sign of something or not. I wouldn't look too much into it. What other questions do you have about the case, or about the trial, or the hearing, or the case in general?
oh, you got to put me on the spot like that. Gee, I guess when the biggest two things I would want to just make sure are solidified in my head when the trial comes is the two sources of unknown DNA. Where were they found? Is it a profile of someone that they found out afterwards because they had to collect other samples? Is it still unknown? So I have questions about the DNA. And the other thing I would like to know at trial, and it'll be interesting to see, is if we can just give this confirmation that they're definitely, when they talk about these confidential informants, that they're just talking about the IgG process, and they're not actually talking about a person giving some sort of testimony. Because the verbiage they use in this hearing, like looking for informant testimony, it makes it sound like it's an actual person pointing out BK.
Right.
And then, there was recently that interview that was re-released with Dylan's friend, which we don't know if it's real or not, where they do say something about showing a picture of BK to Dylan. So again, I don't know. Those are the thoughts going through my head. I'm sorry to bring up something that is alleged on here. I know you try to stick.
No, it's fine. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought up pictures of BK to Dylan, or to anybody that may have seen him that night. Whether that be Dylan or Bethany or even the DoorDash driver, if they were outside and saw something. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. As far as, what was your first one again? It slipped my mind.
I was talking about the unknown DNAs, where they were found. Could they possibly?
So the unknown DNAs, we already heard that the prosecution's already started doing their investigation in those, and then we also heard that they did some investigation into today, or not to today, but a year after the murder, that they were looking at some of the victim stuff. I wonder if all that has something to do with the 3 DNAs, just to cross them out as suspects, or anything else that they could possibly use against them. But when you go back and you read the article, or the document, it states that one of the DNA samples was found outside in a glove, and it was very specific about where it was and its location. If it's the one that the interview room found, he found it like a couple of weeks after the murders, and it wasn't completely under a lot of snow, meaning that it was out there in the snow, but it fell when there was already snow on the ground and stuff, and it wasn't completely buried. So it wasn't from the night of the murders, it was from some other time. But they were super specific about those 2, but she was not very specific. I mean, about that one, but she was not very specific about the other 2. They were just somewhere in the area of where 2 of the victims were. Now, I thought that if it was very close, or on the bodies, or somewhere relative, that she would have been very specific about it as well. But the fact that she wasn't tells me that it was probably like kind of a bit of ways from the scene, so to speak. But it sounds like the prosecution went and did their due diligence and tested it and trying to figure out who they are. And if they do, and they can clear those two DNAs, that's one less avenue for Bryan Kohberger to run up. And then, well, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say, do you know when we're going to find out more about the hearing that was closed recently? Like when they're about the change of venue?
I don't know. I can ask a couple of my sources. I have a few. I haven't talked to one or two in a bit. I can reach out again. Like I found out about a couple of the hearings that had occurred well in advance before everybody. And so I know some of those things. This one, I don't. But I can try to find out if there's, what's up with that. But yeah, no, I wouldn't know. What was the next one?
Well, I mean, I was getting along those lines. If they find out, today they were talking about the moving of hearing. I wonder, would that then push the court date out even further if they had to change the venue, or if they would be able to stick with the same schedule that they have now?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you. Like, that stuff there is beyond my scope of knowledge. The court stuff, when I was in law enforcement, I never had to go to trial but one time, and I didn't have to testify. The guy pled out before I testified, and every defense, every prosecution or district attorney that I spoke to told me that, the main reason I never had to testify is because my report writing was too good. Like I put everything in there. Like you couldn't. Everybody pled guilty. I had 100% batting range. Like I never had to testify unless it was I think a traffic accident, a traffic stop violation stuff. I've had to testify on those, but on the other ones, not once. And, Cyray reminds me a lot of me when I explain things. Like I tend to over explain a lot of things, maybe try to paint a picture. And I see a lot of that with Cyray. So I was laughing through. I was like, man, does this guy get on with his answer? And I was like, man, I guess that's how people feel with me.
I thought that Cyray was so polished, and so many people commented on how maybe not even if what he was saying was a slam dunk, just having him testify for Ann Taylor looks like a slam dunk. And it's because he's so polished, and it's obviously he's doing his passion, and he's obviously a pioneer at what he did. And so it shows when he talks. He's able to speak really smooth and articulate his thoughts and understands it better than anyone else. And just kind of what I was just saying a second ago about the change of venue, Sarah in the comments actually said she thinks it's going to be in August. We're going to hear back about that. I don't know if that's true.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I'm sorry, I read that too. It said August. Yeah, I don't know. I read that too. It was on that page that we were reading earlier when it talked about the change of venue. It said there. But I didn't read it out loud. My mistake. Yeah. But there was one thing that I wanted to clarify with you that I wanted to get your thoughts on. I know that you've the recent videos that I've been watching on your channel that you were mentioning the front door, and you thought that the front door to the murder house, the victim's house, was left open. And I'm familiar with the media report that said that, the news media report that said that, but I'm also familiar with the multiple times that Chief Fry was asked that question and some of the answers that Chief Fry was given referencing the back door. So in one of the very first, let me see if I can find it. I might actually have it. In one of the very first press conference, Chief Fry had mentioned that when they arrived there, that the door was still open. He said that there was no sign of broken entry, and when they arrived there, the door was still open. And afterwards, he was asked about the front door. He said he has no knowledge of the front door.
Right.
And then he was asked again around Christmas, because he was, I think, doing some kind of parade, a Christmas parade. And during that Christmas parade, he was questioned, and he was asked again about the front door, and he said, I don't know anything about a front door being open. From what I understand, and also talking with some of the victims' family members, and this is from what they got from the police before the gag order, is that they believe that the assailant went in through the back sliding glass door and exit the back sliding glass door, leaving it open. So I think that they're referring to the back door And I think that the person that spoke to the reporter misspoke about which door it was, if it was the front or the back. I mean, it's kind of common. One of the biggest misspoken words in the history that has created one of the biggest controversies in the history was the Tupac murder. There was a witness that said that they saw him get in she meant to say an ambulance, but she said a helicopter. And because of that, it started a controversy that he was alive and all these things. And so, I think that might be where the mistake could be, but I'm not sure. Did you hear anything else about that? If it was the front or back door, that's all I have heard and came to.
Well, what I could do, so yeah, I do have that soundbite, and I've put it in a lot of different videos because it's just such a legitimate source. And she's pointing right to the front door, saying she just spoke with a neighbor, and the neighbor also said he hadn't spoke with the police yet to tell them that. It might even be worth just reaching out to her for clarification, which I have a few people I work with have done that on other occasions. But she pointed directly at the front door. Now, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, especially since a lot of the neighbors are kind of like along the side of the house. So they would have been able to see that door as it just like if somebody walked by the front door, they wouldn't know what was going on with the back door. If somebody walked by the back door, they probably wouldn't have known what was going on the front door. And I'll have to re-listen to it again, but I like that theory. And it might even be worth, like I said, shooting an email to the field reporter that did it and just getting clarification if she remembers at this point.
Yeah. And this is the soundbite that I have.
We're not 100% sure if the door was unlocked, but there was no damage to anything, and the door was still open when we got there.
So, I mean, I think he was referring to the back sliding glass door and there not being any damage. But again, I don't know. It could be. Let's see. Mikey comes in with a $2 super chat. Says on the FBI mercy, whether they testify FBI's case. Well, Nick Balance testified in the Daybell cases, so I'm assuming he'll probably testify in this one. And that's the other thing too, right? I mean, they have a witness that's an expert that's already testified in the state of Idaho and has won cases before. So it'll be interesting to see how the defense attacks his credibility. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and just real quick, so Chief was saying in the comments, it's local news station that reported on it. Daniel, did you actually see the soundbite on my channel of the news reporter saying that she had spoke with the neighbors? Okay, I was making sure we were both on the same page. That's all. Yeah,
no, I've seen the actual news coverage that said that in the beginning, because I had it also in my deal when I was trying to put together things that had occurred, early on. Like, all right, we had somebody open the door at this time. That's weird. And you know what I mean? There was a lot of stuff that was really weird. And that was one of the things that I had taken notice of. And then when I went back, it wasn't until I went back and started looking at things and I started to notice that there's been a lot of mistakes or mistaken things that have gone on. So like, for instance, a lot of people think that there's some sort of change in the timeline, that the murders were originally said to have happened between 3 and 4. And that's not accurate. You know, there was at a point when they asked for information of a white Elantra seen in the area between 3 and 4, but there was an Elantra seen in the area between 3 and 4. 328 is the first time it passes by, and it passed it by 3 times. So just because they don't say that, we're looking for it because the murders happened here. I mean, everybody's assuming that's what it was, and that ended up not being the case.
And I should play devil's advocate here because I do know there is like another argument to this, which is there was another neighbor who was walking his dog around, I think it was 11:15. It was in the 11 a.m. hour before he was leaving for work. And this neighbor said he did walk by the house and he had seen that the front door wasn't open. Was not open. Okay. So, and again, because I wasn't like planning on talking about this, so I'll have to I'm just going by memory, and this I'm covering this a little while ago, so I don't remember exactly what it was, but I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, no problem, no biggie. I'm gonna answer or respond to a few of these questions that we have. If you have a couple of questions at this point, put a couple of stars, and if I can see them, I'll get to them as soon as possible. Another asks, do you know if any of the case in the last decade that an expert testimony given in a pre-trial hearing used the phrase does not support guilt, in fact, is exculpatory. I don't follow a lot of hearings, to be honest with you, to know whether or not that happens often or not. I assume that defense's witnesses typically align with the defense's opinions and thoughts, and typically they will, like I said, they'll align with their opinions and thoughts. It's very rare that a defense is going to bring up a witness who's going to say something against what they want. And I think that we saw the closest thing to that today, yesterday, when he was saying that, I have the right to change my mind. And when he was saying that, hey, there's some stuff that's missing that if we get that could be very bad for Bryan Kohberger. It doesn't mean it's good for him. And, those type of things and those type of statements aren't things that I usually would expect to hear from a defensive witness as well. What do you think about that?
I have nothing to compare it to, but I think that what you're saying is true. Like the pendulum is swinging the other way as well. Mm-hmm. So they're, like you said, if it's exculpatory because they don't have it, but if they do have certain things, then without a doubt it could change this reading that Cy has completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean he says I want to keep myself open for to say that this is the chance, and I don't know if I've heard an expert in any case say, hey, I want to reserve the right to change my mind, when it comes to certain information. So I don't know. I like I said, if you went into this with the preception that Bryan Kohberger is innocent and no matter what comes out is going to be in his favor, you're going to see everything that way. And if you went into this the opposite way, then you're going to see it in that way as well. I mean, there's a saying to a hammer, everything's a nail. And, that's true in this situation here as well. Now, unbeknownst to everybody, or what most people think, I'm really, truly not biased. I just go based off the evidence and the information that's there, which is why I was able to piece together that they didn't know who he was until after the IGG was in. It wasn't until December 20th. All those things that I've been saying aren't in favor of the state. It's more in favor of the defense, but they're true. That's what's out there. That's what's true. And so when people get mad when I say things that are true that don't align with their side, sometimes the truth hurts. But I'm just being honest in this. And when I look at it from an unbiased, like, all right, what happened? I think that this could have been a very effective defense had this been trial, but it's not trial. It's the pre-trial stuff. And even they said that they can fix these things. So I don't know. I'll be interested to see how it foils down in actual trial, because that's when it matters. And if you're a juror on this trial, chances are you didn't see yesterday's hearing, because they don't want people that were following this or watching the hearing or any of those things. You're not going to be somebody that watches my show or Truth and Transparency show or Gray Hughes' show or whoever. You're not going to be any of those folks. If they find out that you're following the case in that manner, you're not going to be a juror. So in the end, does it matter? And that's where I kind of say, you know what, if they fix these things and the defense can't bring this up, like, what's the defense going to say? Like, oh, before you fixed it, you had it wrong.
Yeah. It's true. They're fixing these things before trial. It feels like. Mm-hmm. Reading this question right here.
Yeah. Sam Spade says, if there's grainy footage of Kohberger's white Elantra driving around the night of the murders, wouldn't there be good footage of him driving around Linda Lane at 9 a.m. the next day? I would assume there should be some kind of footage. I don't know if he went in front of the Linda Lane. It just says that he was in the area. So I don't know if he went the same way, like if he parked right directly in front of the house. I mean, you can see that house from the band field. So he could have easily been parked out there trying to scope out like what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, I committed a quadruple homicide and there's no cops here.
Yeah, I was looking at pictures of, somebody sent me something interesting on Twitter. It was a post the other day showing me how difficult it is to pick out those CCT footages. It's just interesting how night vision and CCT are so much different than day vision. And wouldn't it be amazing if when they did that video casing, if they did have some daytime color footage of that Elantra, because colors like yellow and And even richer colors sometimes come out looking like they're white on the closed circuit CCT footage, and night vision, you almost even worse. So not putting doubt into the footage that they do have, but it would be so impressive if at 9 a.m. they could have the same camera with the same car, the type of overlay they could do would be really impressive. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, that would be. And I think that would be interesting. I've heard that there's footage. I don't know if it's the Linda Lane footage, but I've heard there is. So I don't know. Patrick says you can remove your SIM card and still have your phone on, but not connected to self provider. I don't know if that stops you from getting your locations or not. But that's a good observation. Is it true Kohberger got in a wreck at a job and was caught on camera, but never would admit it? That's what I had heard was part of the reason why he was forced to resign, was something like that. But that was just something I had heard online. That wasn't anything that I heard from anybody concrete. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I mean, not in a wreck. I've heard different reasons why he's had to, lost jobs, but not that particular thing.
Yeah, I heard that he did something caught on camera and he wouldn't admit to it. And so I'm assuming, I don't remember if it was exactly a wreck or if it was like leaving or I don't know what. Let's see. Daniel, if there's night footage of Kohberger's Elantra, wouldn't it? Okay, yeah, we got that one. Another question. What did you take away from Payne saying they did not find a video depicting his car south of Moscow? Well, we went through that. Let me pull this up one more time. So here is the trip, right? They're saying that there's no camera footage here. This is Monday's Machine Shop, and this is the intersection here between Palouse River Drive and 95. And they're saying that there's no video of him leaving this area because there's cameras all right here. There's cameras all up in here. But yet you have another route, and this is what Payne was saying, is like there's more than one way to get there. And on this route here that I have in yellow, it takes you around this intersection right here. Now, the reason why I had created that route to begin with was because in the PC affidavit, they talk about multiple ways that he could have traveled. And I assumed that, and just like the defense did, that these traffic cams here at this intersection were going to be saved, and they're not. And so I don't know if Bryan Kohberger knew that. If he didn't know that, he may have tried to avoid this area because of that camera or because of the amount of businesses that are there, and chose to go this other area because there is no cameras down this way. And that's what he said. There's no camera footage. There's no cameras. There's no footage that they got. And then she asked, are you saying that you didn't get a footage of a car out there? And he said, no. I mean, if you have no footage whatsoever, then that would be the answer to that question. Now, when the first camera that comes into play, it's no longer even in Idaho. It's when he's crossing over into Washington, and it's in Unionton. Now, this is the first, and I went through everything just like on this. I went through it actually on Google Earth, so it took me a little while. I was busy today. But this is the first time you see possible cameras. I'm not even sure those are cameras, but they look like cameras. So this is the first time you possibly could get cameras, and this isn't on Idaho 95 South. This is on East Blair Street, 307 East Blair Street in Unionton, Washington. So the fact that there's no cameras that have him going there, to me, is an exculpatory, which means they're just throwing out that word like nothing. And this is something that is easily provable. I mean, I just proved that there's another route that can go, and you're not in the cameras that Ann Taylor is claiming that he should be on if he left. And she's right. He would be on some of these cameras if he went this direction. However, Sergeant Payne stated in his testimony and also in the probable cause affidavit that there's multiple ways to get to this area, and that from what they have is that they have him seen a last time leaving Valencia Drive at a high rate of speed, and then the next time that they have him anywhere is when he turns his phone on or connects back to the network at 4:48 on 95. And that was, he said in testimony that it was closer to Genesee is when his phone came back on, which if that's the case, that means that when he turns his phone on, he's extremely far away from the closest tower to the King Road residence. So when they did their warrant for phones that were connected to that tower, he wouldn't have been there. He's super far away. So that's kind of what I was
like it's by design almost, right? Like
exactly.
that would be by design, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what are the chances that the person, like, what you really have to say, like, what are the chances that this person who knows a lot about cloud data and things of that nature, in fact, he put it in his resume, turns his phone back on just outside of where he would have gotten caught. And if he put his bag in a Faraday cage or bag or a dark bag, so that way the signal doesn't bounce out. I mean, he planned for this. He planned that if he got caught, and which I think that's why he said allegedly that, you know, that when he wants to be exonerated, that you go look at my phone locations, go look at my phone location. That's the first thing he said. You know, I wasn't there. Go look at my phone locations. And, you know, maybe, and like you said, there's other ways to spoof your location. So I don't know. Maybe he tried to outsmart somebody, and I don't know.
There's a lot of different ways to spoof your location. So it's not just you can do so there's a GPS spoofing app that you can have. That's probably the one that comes to mind for most people. You can also use a VPN, and there are also other things you can do too, which is like I believe the term is routing, where you can actually tap into somebody else's phone. And these are all pretty easy things to do, and there's just warnings to, you know, there's no good reason to do them. So people, anyway, you can route into somebody else's phone and you can make it look like you're there. And these are all simple things that with very little internet research, any of us could really do. But the GPS spoofing is the big one, because you can download an app and actually make yourself appear in different areas. It's really interesting stuff. There's about 6 or 7 different ways that I know of, or I've read about, that you can change these cell phone signals. But the most elementary way is to just plain and simple block, like you're saying, put it in a token, or I can't remember what you called it, but put it in a pouch and block the signal. It's spelled Faraday, Faraday cage. And you can make one yourself with just like an aluminum piece of foil and wrapping it around your phone. And any day products can get that, you know, the same thing done, which to me, like, again, you know, isn't mean exculpatory. Exculpatory means that it proves it wasn't him. There's evidence that puts him somewhere else during the time. His phone not connected to a network and not showing where he was at is not exculpatory. It just doesn't show where he's at. Now, if his phone was connected to the network and it showed him at Wawa White Park at 4:30 in the morning, then that would be exculpatory. But they're not arguing that. In fact, the only argument that we've ever seen that they said that Cy was going to present, which he didn't, which means, you know, which tells me that some of the information that they had just gotten, because he talked about that, we just got some of these, you know, textiles and all these other things to determine certain things. And he said that November was accurate. They got 4 versions. One of them, those 4 versions were different months, and that November was accurate. That's the only one that he was able to check. But the initial thing was that they were going to argue that he didn't travel, that he wasn't the vehicle in front of Floyd Cannabis Shop. And that's what Cy was going to point out today. Cy said that they got a list of things, and now they're no longer arguing that. Does that mean that with those list of things that they got, that they were able to prove that this was Bryan Kohberger's car in front of Floyd's Cannabis Shop? Because they dropped the ball on that argument. What do you think there, Rose? I'm just glad you brought it up, because I don't know how I missed that in all of my reviewing today, but that's so right on the money. We talked a lot about Floyd's Cannabis Shop, and that was it was kind of like an aha moment. They're like, I was thinking to myself, my goodness, if they put in that PCA that they had affirmatively identified, you know, him on that camera, but it wasn't even mentioned at the hearing. And I now that you bring it up, I think that is pretty, the explanation for that would be pretty cut and dry. It proved he was there because they would have brought it up. It would have been one of the things that they labeled under exculpatory.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the first sentence. Cy is going to show that Bryan Kohberger wasn't this vehicle heading into Moscow, and they didn't show that. I was very disappointed. I was really hoping that they would, just because, like, you know, and maybe I'm being a little bit sarcastic. I am. I'm lying. I didn't know it wasn't like that at all. But they didn't bring that up. They didn't bring up Wawawai Park whatsoever. You know, at no point does Cyril say that at this time and look, this is where he was at. The only thing that he says is that there is missing information that are missing time that doesn't put him in the house, puts him in the neighborhood, which one, if that's the case, then they kind of lied about where Bryan Kohberger was, because he said he was never in Moscow. He was south and southwest. But two, if he didn't take his phone with him inside the house, I mean, he wouldn't be inside the house anyways. And I don't know. I mean, that's the other thing too, is I'm not an expert in this. I don't know anything. So I could be very wrong on my interpretation of it. You know?
I just, it's like everything else in this case. It's so hard to make any conclusion because you know you're only getting like a fraction of what's actually there. Because for me, we're talking about all this tower evidence, but Cyril specifically said no metadata included. So there's like an entire forensic part of this phone, forensic analysis of this phone we haven't even seen yet. And so it's so hard to make any judgment without knowing all the evidence. It's like everything in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I know a lot of people are saying that Bill Thompson isn't saying much or whatever or whatnot. You know, I think that the prosecution is now pandering towards us as far as who their audience is. And I think one of the biggest clues to that was today when the prosecution was trying to explain all the evidence that they had turned over, and the judge is like, I already know how much it is. And they're like, no, you need to know. We need to clarify this. It wasn't because they were clarifying it for the judge. They're clarifying for us that are questioning and this and that. And I think that the female, I don't know what her name is, the female prosecutor probably has a better liking. People like her probably better than Bill Thompson. So that's probably why we're seeing more of her than Bill Thompson. But I think that's mainly it. I think when it comes down to trial, I don't know. We'll see if Bill Thompson's still rubbing off people the wrong way, then we might just see the female prosecutor the whole way. But I don't think that him not talking is a clue of anything. You know, what do you think?
No, I think they're definitely playing this to the court of public opinion right now. And it's to their best interest to do so, because the biggest thing going on is determining whether they're going to have a change of venue. So why not do everything you can to influence the public? And I just also think Ann Taylor is an impressive woman. You know, she's quite a pit bull, and she's doing everything she can as a defense attorney to give her client, you know, the best chance that he can. So it's impressive to watch her, but you can tell, like when you said that the judge was like, well, I know how much data, you don't have to repeat it. And she said, no, let me say. There were a couple times where you could kind of hear her being like, okay, you know, or like little breathless, like, you know, so I could hear it too. There seems to be a lot of frustration and tension, but it's placating or playing to the audience that they're playing to us to try public influence. So
yeah, the public court of public opinion is real. It really is. And they're going to pander. Both sides are. And that's why they say some of the things they say. I'm gonna put some of these questions that we have. If you have any other ones, please star them, and that way we can see them. And then we'll go forward from there. Let's see. Glenda says the statement that is now on record as other suspects. Who are they? What is the evidence receipts from investigation on? Well, we already know that they had other people that they were investigating. The defense stated that when they said that the law enforcement surreptitiously took a cigarette butt from somebody to test their DNA. So right then and there, that tells us that they were investigating other people. It wasn't just, oh, let's target on the PhD guy from Pullman. There was a few people. Now, they brought up other suspects. The prosecution brought up the fact that they are doing or have done more on trace DNA evidence at the defense's request, or because of the defense. Now, the DNA that was in question that the defense had brought up were the 3 unknown samples. And like I said earlier, I think it's really weird that, or odd, that they would push that at this point when the prosecution now can go to the law enforcement and say, hey, this is going to be a problem, go fix this. And they're allowing the prosecution to fix any little mistake that they had. Thus, when it comes down to trial, those DNA samples aren't going to be unknown anymore. And if they have an alibi, we're not going to hear about it because Ann Taylor can't use that.
So do you think that the only reason that they were labeled as, so that you don't think they're unknown anymore? You think that they were just unknown pieces of DNA because at the time that's how they were unknown, so that's how they were listed. But you think that now they probably do have a workup on those DNAs?
I would. I mean, the prosecution or the defense just told you how they're going to try their case. They're going to say that these 3 DNAs had something to do with the crime. If you can go out there and get in front of them, like Eminem did in 8 Mile, if you know everything they're going to say against you and you can get out in front of it, then yeah, I think it's going to be a big issue for the defense. I don't think it's going to be a small issue because well, let me put it this way. I don't think it hurts the defense, but it could have been very beneficial to the defense if they had that, if they would have used that during trial. You know, them not saying it now doesn't hurt or doesn't help Bryan Kohberger. But if they would have said that during the trial, during when there's actually 12 jurors there and they're listening, I mean, imagine how impactful that would be. It's like, isn't it true that there are 3 unknown DNA samples that are male around the house and near where the bodies are? And if they said, yeah, that's true, then that's going to bring people thinking, all right, well, was it just Bryan Kohberger? Was there somebody else? Was it somebody else completely? Could there have been an accomplice? And then you started throwing in all these questions, and now the prosecution has an opportunity to go in there and fix any of those things. And like the same thing with Cyree, to me, at a certain point, he was like, look, all you have to do, and this is what I would have done if they would have called me on this date, all you have to do is get this and then get that and get this, and it's fixable. All you got to do is that and this and that, basically giving them a blueprint on how to fix their issue. You know, Cyree hasn't been a defendant or hasn't been a witness for the defense before. And that was something that Bryan Kohberger his defense were trying to make sure that everybody understood. But because of that, and because of I think because he's an ex-police officer, I felt like he was pretty standoffish. Did you feel the same way, or did you think that he was how did you feel about his testimony?
Well, just to reiterate what you said, he was impressive, like the way he talked. And I don't know, I think that at times I did feel that he was, how do I say it? Like that he was giving like a rehearsed statement almost. Gosh, I'm sorry, it put me on the spot, but yeah, it did feel like he was giving a little bit of rehearsed statement. And I actually can I go back to the DNA for a second? I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about this. Those DNAs were ran through CODIS at one point, right? Those unknown DNAs. That's how they know they're unknown, right? It's not because they just didn't do anything with them. So they would have. They had a workup of those at that time, right?
Yes. Okay,
so I would imagine we wouldn't know if they've identified them, right? They wouldn't.
Not now. I mean, even the state said that as of December 17th, that they had 3 unknown DNA samples. And my question to that, or my answer to that, was as of December 17th, you didn't know who the DNA on the sheath was either. Now everybody was like, oh, no. They knew him. They knew who he was since November 25th. We found out that's not true. They didn't know who he was until December 20th. And so even that sample was unknown at the time that they specifically put on the date. Now, is it still unknown? I don't know. Was it known still at the time of that hearing? Possibly. Is it still unknown today? I don't know, because the prosecution flat out said we did work. They said, and they used past tense too. They didn't say doing or are doing. They did work on DNA transfer DNA, that the extra transfer DNA work that the defense had brought up. So that's the only DNA that I'm aware of that the defense had brought up. And so I'm assuming that since it's in past tense that they've probably completed that.
Well, I'm wondering if that's the case, would they have done genetic genealogy workups on all of them? I'm just wondering if they know who they are at this point, I guess is what I'm getting at. And,
I mean, resources are a big issue, right? You know, a lot of people think that the law enforcement stops or the world stops when a crime like this happens, and that's not the case. The FBI have multiple cases that they're working. I mean, even during the time that they were working this one, Nick Balance was obviously still, I'm assuming he was working the Vallow case or the Daybell case. He was in that one during around this time. So, there's other cases that they're working on. There's other things that they're doing. So you're probably going to the piece of evidence that means the most. Now, if you have DNA somewhere in the house that's like in a common area, like on a hallway or a doorknob or something like that, and it's transfer DNA, it's probably not that strong, especially if it's mixed. If you have like multiple source DNA, that typically means that somebody brought it in, right? Somebody rubbed up against somebody and they got their DNA on their person. Now, obviously, they would have their own DNA on their person, even if it was like their shirt or whatever, because their clothing is on top of their body. So they would have their DNA there. And then whenever they then rubbed their shoulder or whatever the case may have been on a wall or something, then that's how you transfer it. But typically those things aren't, they're not single source. They're a mixture. And the other thing is the Bryan Kohberger DNA came in on the item that we suspect that the killer brought into the house, right? So you have what would be more beneficial or more impactful to you, DNA on an item that the killer brought in or DNA in a common area of the house?
right. And especially when you bring it up and say it in terms of like resources.
Yeah. And then, the resources there, they couldn't just stop it and stop for that. So my assumption is that they went for the one that was the strongest one, and then now they can go back, which is probably why they have that policy that the FBI does, where the law enforcement has to exhaust all of their resources and not have a suspect. It's not law. Like if the FBI wanted to just say, all right, we're going to violate our own policy and do this, that doesn't mean that the person gets off. There's nothing illegal about that. It's work policy. And the reason they probably have that policy is because if they did that and they called it off and they said, all right, you know what, we're going to help you from the jump, then a bunch of other departments across the United States are going to want the same type of thing whenever they have their cases. And murders happen quite often in this country. So Tiffany says, why not just put the actual photo of Brian's car up instead of a stock, like they did in the Savannah and Matthew case? The actual black truck. That's odd to me. Well, to me, I think that's because they didn't have a good view of it, and they were looking for a type of vehicle, which is what they had said here. They were looking for a 2011 to 13 Hyundai Elantra type vehicle, which, like I said, we can pretty much prove that they were looking for that type of vehicle because they didn't know who Bryan Kohberger was until December 20th, and his vehicle was among a list of other vehicles that they were looking at because it matched the 2011 to 13 type vehicle on November 25th. So that alone right there is what saves their tail, in my opinion, on that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then, they might not have even had all of the footage, because if you think back, it was like 30 days afterwards where they actually went to the liquor store and got that footage where allegedly the car was seen. So they might not have even had all of the footage that they are going to be using at trial too. So just a thought too, when they at least released that original picture. Of course, they didn't have all the footage then.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too. I mean, a lot of folks think that everything was there at one time and all together, and that's not the case, whatsoever. So, things have to come in. Things can still come in, and I think people get upset if they were to find out that something were to be turned up or something. And the truth is that those type of things happen all the time. I was just talking to somebody earlier today about Kaylana Turner. We talked about her on our case. She was a person that went missing not too far from here. Her parents actually came on our channel, and she'd been missing for over 400 days, and they recently found and discovered her body. She was deceased. She's been deceased since then, and her body was found 500 yards away from where her vehicle was. And so this was an area that they searched multiple times, and they had multiple different search teams out there, professional search teams out there that couldn't find her. And so I say that to say that just because something is found later on, it's not because something's planted. More often than not, sometimes things take a little bit longer to find. Let's see. What else do you got?
Well, no, I just think that's a tragic, but it is a good example. It is a good example. We're only human.
Yeah. I mean, there's that one. There's the Vanessa Guillen case where she was beaten and dismembered in the Fort Hood, like one of the armories in the Fort Hood barracks or Fort Hood base. They had, this guy ended up talking his girlfriend into helping him dismember the body and then, light it on fire and stuff. And they had both of their cell phone records, and they found where they were. They found the burn marks on the floor where they burned the trash. They couldn't find the body. They couldn't find the dump site, couldn't find it. And then like 2-3 months later, a work crew on the side of the road found it, and it was just right there. It wasn't too far away. So those things happen. I mean, getting something in a second trip, third trip, those things happen. It's not uncommon. You know what I mean?
No, it's interesting when you put it in perspective like that.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find, because somebody had asked me a question about Cy-Ray, and I got to find it, where he had said about where it said that the Floyd Cannabis Shop and stuff. Do you know where that one is? The Floyd Cannabis Shop?
I saw it, and somebody showed me the other day on the internet. It was actually 12 gauge. He was showing me the other day, and we were taking the Floyd is the cannabis dispensary, right? It's not the vape shop. Okay, yeah. Somebody showed me it the other day, but I couldn't create it. I was just looking at the chat. I saw somebody in the chat who I actually saw at the trial, at the hearing. It's interesting to see Twiz on here.
Oh, I think I found it. Hold on. All right, so right here, Mr. Kohberger intends to offer testimony of Cy-Ray to show Bryan Kohberger's mobile device was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow, Idaho, November 13. That Bryan Kohberger's mobile device did not travel east on Moscow-Pullman Highway in the early morning hours of November 13th, and thus could not be the vehicle captured along Moscow-Pullman Highway near Floyd's Cannabis Shop. So he was supposed to provide evidence of this, and it didn't happen. Another mic drop, Twiz. I've had a few, my man.
Oh, yeah.
I've had a few. So, but yeah, like I said, if this was what he was going to testify on, and this was partial corroboration, right? This wasn't full corroboration, so we need to understand that. And we knew that, and we know that they got some extra stuff from the defense or from the prosecution referencing the cast information, and now they're not arguing that. I wonder why.
What has changed?
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I mean, it's just, I get it. There's, people want him to be innocent. I don't know why they want him to be innocent, but I get it. I just don't see the evidence there. And I know somebody said that they think that I want him to prove he's beyond, to prove he's innocent. And that's not the case. I just think that the state has done a pretty damn good job to say that they got their guy. And so if I was him, I would try to put up as much information as I could to disprove that.
I guess it's true, but if any one of us ever finds ourselves in the hot seat, it's good to know that there are people at least making sure that everything is on the up and up. And that's what I love about all the people that audit their First Amendment rights and try to make sure everything is, because the system is only as good as the people who run it. And unfortunately, some people have had experiences with bad people in their world. So, they they bring those experiences to life wherever they go. And the biggest thing is to have tolerance for each other and listen to each other's opinions, because that way we can actually come to consensus or have a conversation. Without talking about it, you never get to the truth, you know, I feel.
That's true. No, you're right. And again, I'm not saying that, you know, you shouldn't look at all the evidence or any of those type of things. I just have a hard time believing, you know, I know a lot of people say they have a hard time believing in coincidences. Some of the coincidences that they have a hard time believing are that the Eugene, Idaho or Eugene, Oregon Elantra came back to some random person in Colorado, and that when you go through the investment line of who owns the house on King Road, it comes back to somebody else in some other part of Colorado, but they both come back to Colorado, even though Idaho's not too far from Colorado. That's like if I were to find somebody owning something from Oklahoma here, it's not uncommon. But that was too much of a coincidence. I think the other too big of a coincidence was that Bethany Funke had gotten arrested apparently at a public place at a national park, the Walleye Park, in October of 2022 for a drug-related offense. I don't even know if that's true, but I've seen this out there. And that Bryan Kohberger claims that he was out there, that somehow proves that, because Bryan Kohberger claims that he was at the Walleye Park the night of the murders, and that Bethany Funke was arrested, apparently, allegedly, at Walleye Park, somehow proves that Bryan Kohberger is innocent. I don't see the connection there. Do you?
I don't, but I'm going to tell you right now, Daniel, I explore every theory people bring to me until I don't ever want to use the word debunk, but you know, I definitely like what you're talking about Bethany. I went through and I read everything that person had to say, all of the research that she did on it, just to see if there was anything in there that I found relevant. And just to go back to the fact that if it was ever me in the hot seat, I'd be so grateful that there are people out there watching out and making sure there's nothing nefarious going on. And yeah, but I did read it. I didn't necessarily make the connection, but it's noted to me. And if something else relevant comes up, you know, but I don't know what it has to do with this case. But actually, I take that back. If I were a defense attorney, there is maybe some argument I might make about touch DNA or connection, or I don't know, but there might be something there in terms of that, but I don't know.
They already said, Bryan Kohberger's defense team says there's no connection between him and the victims. If he had a connection to one of the surviving roommates, that would be a connection to a victim, one of their roommates. So just because they both were at a public place or claiming to be at a public place at one time, is it coincidental? Maybe, but I think it's a less of a coincidence than, you know, somebody out there matching Bryan Kohberger's height and weight, who also drives a vehicle that matches his, who also didn't have a front license plate during the time that he was out and about with his phone off at an unusual hour with the weather conditions that they had. And that person who also was doing all this while Bryan Kohberger's phone was not connected to the network also had on his person Bryan Kohberger's DNA. If you don't see the coincidence, if you think that's not too big of a coincidence and the other beforehand things are too big of a coincidence, I don't know what to say. I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. I'm just saying that's the stuff that I get.
I do, but I will refrain from making my final opinion until trial and when I see all the evidence. But he would be the unluckiest person. He would be one of the unluckiest people to ever live in that area, to have all these things go wrong and put him at least even in the vicinity of that crime scene, that from what we've seen so far, and we haven't even seen all the evidence. So
right,
I'm there with you, but like I said, I try to take the mindedness of an objective, independent journalist. I feel like that's maybe my role in the true crime community, because I don't necessarily have a background on the criminal or law enforcement side. Maybe that's the role that I can at least try to be an objective voice, kind of like an independent journalist, and just make sure I'm documenting and learning everything I can about the moving parts of this case.
No, for sure. And like, again, if you're a person that wants to wait for everything, you know, I do too. I'm not saying he's 100% guilty. I'm open to the idea that there's something out there that says he's not. I was open to Cy Ray coming in and saying that he turned left at this street and he wasn't the vehicle on Floyd's cannabis shop. And I was open to see how the state was going to counter this objection, what they're, how they were going to, answer for it. I was a little bit not upset. I was a little bit disappointed when it didn't come out. But at the end of the day, I think I know why it didn't come out. But yeah, innocent until proven guilty. I don't think that Bryan Kohberger should be put up to the firing squad today. I think he deserves his chance in court. I think that he deserves I would prefer that he got granted the change of venue, which is something that his defense team is asking for. So it's not like I'm being one-sided here either. I would be for that, not necessarily because I think it would favor Bryan Kohberger. I think that there are some folks that are very much well informed about this case, and maybe perhaps go into some of the more conspiratorial things. And perhaps if this is staying in, closer to Moscow, those people can have some sort of influence on other people that in a small net community could be the jurors. And so I would rather not fall into that and fall into a place where the evidence is all that matters. Because at the end of the day, that's all that should matter, right?
Amen. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and that's what I am 100% for. And when it comes to the evidence that's been given to the prosecution or to the defense, I am 100% for Bryan Kohberger and his defense team getting all the evidence and all the discovery that they possibly can. I'm also for everything being done in the proper way and in the order in which they should be done, and which includes Bryan Kohberger's alibi, which should have been done a long time ago before any of this was done. So just food for thought on that one. Let me see if there's anything else in here. Do you see a question or anything that you wanted to address?
Well, I saw that DJV 1855 said Cyril not offering information is like the Steelers not showing a play in preseason. I thought you'd appreciate that one.
Hey, we do show up and play in preseason. It's the regular season when our quarterback failed. But we got two new ones this year. We got two new quarterbacks this year. We'll see what happens. I'm excited. We have the hardest schedule in the NFL, so I'm not above where I don't think we're going to go undefeated. I think we're going to have a very tough time, but I think we're a much better team than we were last year. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see when you beat our new quarterback up here in Boston.
Oh yeah. Which one? May?
The Patriots just got our newest quarterback, and it looks like
yeah. May. I've heard he needs to work on some things.
Well, the locals love him, and he's already involved in a lot of local stuff, so we're rooting for him. So.
That's good. How did you feel about Jones leaving?
I haven't really got. I know I wear the hat all the time, but I'm not well versed in the Patriots. I started wearing the. Just to tell you guys a little story there. I started wearing the hat recently because I saw the Brady roast. Did you guys catch that?
I saw most of it. That was hilarious.
It was really good. I thought Brady was such a good sport. I felt so bad for Gronk. I think that's why Brady's not talking to some of the comedians right now, but because they all picked on Gronk. It's like there's not much to pick on Tom Brady for. You gotta.
Well.
So.
Yeah, I think he got upset about some of the stuff that affected his kids because they were talking about his divorce and her trainer and her, type of things that were kind of a little bit risque. I don't think he was prepared for it. But yeah, it sounds like he said he's not going to do that again. So if you haven't seen it, go enjoy it because you probably won't see a part 2 to it.
And it's already edited, so.
Well, the only part that they edited, I think, is when they booed what's her name? Kim Kardashian.
Yeah.
And so that part was edited. I don't know if there was anything else edited, but I heard that was the part that was edited.
She paid, I guess, supposedly $1 million to have that part edited out. So I don't know.
Man, she could have gave me $1 million. I would have gone there and edited it out.
I also feel like, if you have $1 million to spend and you could actually do that, I mean, honestly, you might want to pay to have someone edit out all the booing on one of the most viewed things on Netflix. But.
Right. I mean, she could pay me $500,000. Not only will I remove the booing, I'll add some cheering. It'll be great. It'll be great. You'll love it. But yeah, so just kind of close things out on this one. I think at the end of the day, I don't think that this hearing is going to have an effect on the case, on any of the information or the evidence. I think it's something that I think the defense maybe jumped the gun a little bit with. I would have held on to this until trial, but we'll see. What are your final thoughts on this?
I same here. I don't know if I saw everything that everyone else saw, but I guess the part that I'm most interested in is to know what happened in that closed hearing, because I think where we're all at right now is seeing if in August they're going to decide to move that trial to another venue. So
yeah, I hope they do. Like we've broken that down quite a bit. I hope they do. It'll be interesting. It'll definitely be interesting. I'm gonna try to. Oh no, my light just went out on me.
Daniel, I don't know if it's okay to mention people's names in the chat or not, but one of your people in the chat who was actually at the hearing says it will be interesting. Cy says he knows exactly where BK was. Cy doesn't help defense attorneys unless he knows it. And what's interesting about that comment is that YouTuber allegedly had a private conversation with Cy Ray after the trial, walked into his car. That's what I heard on a live stream earlier. So I thought it's an interesting statement.
That's interesting. I mean, I like to see the proof of it. And again, like if he says that he knows where he's at, why is it that we're still here? Why not do a motion to drop the charges? Like, we have that's truly exculpatory evidence. That's real exculpatory evidence. And so
there's a comment there. Heather Rollins, exactly, Daniel. Cy Ray covered his butt by saying he reserved the right to change his mind.
Yeah, and I mean, he even went to that extent. If he knew for sure where Bryan Kohberger was at, why would he even say that he has the right to change his mind? Why not go up there? I know where he's at. Like, so like I said, to a hammer, everything's a nail. And sometimes when you're wanting to hear a certain thing, you can make it sound like that. Kind of like when everybody was listening to that audio about what did you tell Adam? Everybody heard something different, whatever they wanted to hear. I have no idea what it honestly says. I thought it said something about did you ditch those guys? Something to that nature when I heard it, and then somebody said, "Oh, it says this." And when I had that in my mind, then I was like, "Oh, okay, well that kind of makes sense, I guess." I
never could find anything out conclusive, and I remember Jeff H, who you're going to have on your show, I think on Monday, who said he had redone a video on it on his channel, and he said something that I didn't hear before, and I think it was the quote that you just made. He's going to get you for that or something. But it is funny how everyone breaks it down differently and hears something differently. Just like with the closed circuit video, it's almost like people see things in the shadows and other people can't see them. It is interesting what people pick up and other people don't.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm open to it. I mean, if there's something there, like legitimate, like there's something there, send me that clip of that. I'd like to hear this person that was talking and said this, because I'm not familiar with it like that. I'm not familiar with anybody saying that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find this one thing. And it's bothering me because I'm not going to be able to find it in time, I don't think. Son of a gun. And I was sending it to everybody earlier. That's what happens when you can't. And you go through so much crap. Son of a gun. Where was it? Oh, well. I guess
I think they said, let get you something to eat. So as you can see, there's something completely different that he thinks was heard in that video.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody's going to hear something different, in my opinion. But we'll know then, you know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, look. So, let me share this. So this was 7 months ago. December 19th was a bad day for Bryan Kohberger. That's when I figured out that December 19th was the day that Bryan Kohberger was they found out who he was. So this was 7 months ago. 7 months ago. Would you look at that? I guess I might know what I'm talking about after all.
Good job, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you know, and I'm not trying to just kind of, you know, tout my own horn or anything like that, but I feel like this case is pretty easy to follow, even with the what do you call it, the just following what the law enforcement is doing. I think that'll tell you more or less what's going on. And I'm wanting to find out. I want to find the interview that I had with Gabriel Vargas, because that one's the one that I wanted to end the show with. I don't think I'm going to find it. Oh, well.
I know what one you're talking about. I hope you do find it, because I've seen it before, and it is an impressive clip, because I played it on my live stream for my co-producer, Gia, and I remember her finding it really interesting too. I guess it probably was, I don't think it was 2 months ago though. I mean, I want to say it was like in November maybe, or October of last year.
Is it this one? This is the one where Bryan Kohberger, where when I read the article where the defense team was saying that Brian's brother did this.
I think it had Lana. I think it was Lana in it too. Like there was 3 of you on panel, if I remember.
Yeah, Lena was there. It was Lena, myself, and it was Miss Vargas. And I know I have it here somewhere. But it's not that close. I mean, it's gonna bother me. It's probably like a year ago then. Man, if it was that long, no, because this is when I talked with Christy, and that was about a year ago almost. And so, yeah, I was hoping I could find it. Cartel, BTK, cartel, new evidence points at Kohberger. I want to say it was only like I thought it was only like an 8-minute video.
I'm gonna look on my phone. Maybe I can find it for you.
See, I thought it was on this one because this one's like 7 minutes, but I don't see her on this one now. And it's unfortunate because I just told a lot of people where it was at. I was like, hey, go check this one out. Go check this one out. And I was copying and pasting it into the comment section. And I was like, go check this one out. Go check this one out. And that was the one that I wanted people to check out, because it was the one where she tells me like the IGG is not anything for that. And my gosh, this is going to bother me.
What the 2 types are called, the IgG and the it's the SR. What kind did she say that it does?
I found it.
Oh, good.
I found it. I'm all excited. All right, so
2 SMP profiles. There could be 50 SMP profiles. It doesn't make a difference. It don't make a difference. That doesn't change the fact that Bryan Kohberger's DNA matched the DNA that was on the sheath through an STR profile. Let me ask. It wasn't necessarily the science or anything behind it, like to that extent. It's that an STR profile is created first, and then you have the genetic stuff and the SMP profile. My question is, if something was done in your lab incorrectly, whether it was mishandling, contaminating, or perhaps
there's nothing contaminated because she doesn't have that.
Or right.
I want to explain one thing. So what I'm doing here is I like to ask a lot of questions and ask the same questions over and over again in several different ways. So that way I can get an answer, and then I can also get somebody to answer the question that I want. That way, when I corner them, quote unquote, with a question that they can't get out of because of the answers to the questions that they made beforehand. And the goal to that is to also maybe to confuse a little bit, so that way I can get a more honest answer. And so here I was trying to ask, what can the SNP profile do to affect the STR profile? And I didn't say anything about the fruit of the poisonous tree yet. That's where I was going. That was what my intention was. That's the sole purpose of this entire talk. They don't know that yet, but that's what I know, and that's where I'm going with this. So there's reasons why they're not confused, but they're saying no, it doesn't have anything to do with this or that. It's done on purpose.
Anything. There's nothing there.
That's not the DNA. I thought you don't have the DNA.
No, I do not have the DNA, but that does not mean that it doesn't come to the lab with contamination. You have to think.
I'm talking
DNA
about
that's
when
been
you did it, though. I'm talking about.
So one thing that needs to be preferenced first is that she had stated prior to this that they don't actually physically get the DNA at their genetic lab. They get basically a list of names, and they have to go through all sorts of stuff to find out who this person is. I'm not sure how much contamination / how much interference or chain of custody can be lost with the transfer of names. You guys let me know in the comment section.
So, like,
My thing is basically what I'm trying to say is if something was done inappropriately or wrong, or they used the wrong
you mean like
ancestry
beginning,
or
Daniel?
23.
Like, when are you
No,
talking?
I'm talking about after the STR profile. If something goes wrong and there's a mishandling, whatever the case may be, how would that get the STR profile thrown out?
well,
the
STR profile is not it's not created with the genealogist. It's created with the state crime lab or the local crime lab. So if whatever that
He's talking about before you ever get it, Gabriella.
Right.
He's talking about
What I'm saying is there's an STR profile. That
okay, let's do like this.
Also, when I say that I'm referring to the fruit of the poisonous tree, I think that you can see that that's when it clicks, that the questions that I've been asking and where we're going. I think you can see it.
Let's do like this. We're at the crime scene, Daniel.
But the STR profile has nothing to do with what I do. Nothing to do.
So my question is, that's exactly what I wanted to know. So because there's a big question right now that if something was done in the creation of the SNP profile, that would somehow get the STR profile thrown out. The theory is that there's something that the IgG and or the SNP profile or anything that somebody can do something there to get the STR profile thrown out. So exactly. So
you're not going to have anything to compare it to.
So let me just clarify. So when
I'm referencing just so everybody knows, I'm referencing the fruit of the poised tree is what I'm trying to get to.
I totally get what you're getting at, and I will tell you this: when the STR profile is created, it is created on its own prior to IgG involvement. It can be sent, the DNA that's sent to the third-party lab for IgG can be sent from the same DNA in the same tube, but the STR profile is already created. It has nothing to do with what I do, but the STR profile is already created. It has nothing to do with what I do, but the STR profile is already created. It has nothing to do with what I do.
And there you have it, straight from the defense's witness. The STR profile has nothing to do with the SNP profile. Well, let me know in the comment section. You think there's something here, or is this just some sort of tomfoolery, misdirection, the whole 9 yards? And again, one more time for those in the back that refuse to hear.
And I will tell you this: when the STR profile is created, it is created on its own prior to IgG involvement. But the STR profile is already created. It has nothing to do with what I do.
So I know some people are arguing about the IgG and all this other stuff. The argument there really is, in my opinion, they're trying to get a timeline and they're trying to get the prosecution to admit that law enforcement got Bryan Kohberger's name because of the IgG, not because of the WSU officer that found the car on November 25th. And they're trying to basically say that they're lying because of that. And because they lied on that, then it's thrown out. Which, even if that ends up being the case, that doesn't mean you can't retry him. It's not an acquittal. You know what I mean?
I do. I've heard Bill Thompson say, if you were to throw this case out together today, we would rearrest him immediately. So there's more. There's even more that we don't know, I think. And I was just going to say, you explained how you work that up. Good job applying your police skills to YouTube, your police interrogation skills to YouTube.
I mean, it's not just that. I do sales too. I've done sales, and that is really where I've done a lot more of my interrogations. To be honest with you, is when I'm talking to somebody and they're trying to do some sales techniques. So I'm pretty sure my law enforcement training probably helped me in that as well. But I think it's a combination of both of those things. But to me, I also knew the answer ahead of time. I already knew what the answer was, that there was no connection. And so I can navigate down that alley because I know the answer. I know where I'm going. And so it made it a little bit more easier. But, you can get some folks, if they know where you're going, to be defensive on it and not want to be not answer, maybe not necessarily honestly, but try to answer the best way that would shed the best light on their narrative. so to speak. And so when you get persons to answer questions beforehand that don't allow them to go down those avenues is where, in my opinion, where it works. But yeah, believe it or not, I've only interrogated like law enforcement style, like 4 people. And then this was, I think what, it'll be 20 years, like in 3 years. So it's been a while.
You know, I actually, when I think about it, I wouldn't think it's something that, unless they call like the same person in to do interrogation each time, I wouldn't think it's something you would do that often. I mean, what are the chances you have to interrogate? I mean, you don't interrogate someone for a traffic stop. You know, it's
my interrogations. One was a guy who ran from me. He was part of the cartels. He was actually trying to kidnap a guy, and I caught him in the act, and then we got in a high-speed chase. Ended up near a high school, and that's where the guy lived. He ended up barricading himself with his brother and had multiple weapons in the house. And long story short, because of the timing and the school was about to be let out, we didn't want something to accidentally go off and an innocent person being killed. So we called it off. We ended up getting warrants and picking him up the next day. And I had to drill him a little bit about him being the guy that was driving the vehicle and why he ran, things of that nature. I assisted in the apprehension of a couple of, there's a guy who was SAing his daughter and his stepdaughter. And I assisted in that investigation and assisted in that interrogation as well. And that one, I think, took about 2-3 different people as well. So that's pretty much the extension of my investigative and I said investigative techniques and skills and stuff like that. So I did take courses. I did go through certain things, but majority of it is just I like to debate. I like to argue sometimes. And I think that's where I get majority of my skills, where it comes to like talking to people to get them to, to say certain things. So yeah.
Just natural.
Pretty much. Let's see. Sharky says, became a new YouTube member. Jeremiah asked if I iced tea on. Did you ice tea on? No, I didn't. It's actually very disturbing to talk to somebody who is doing that to his 6-year-old stepdaughter and 7-year-old daughter in the same house. It was very hard, and it took a while to overcome some of those things too. Some of the visual stuff that you see. So one of the other reasons why it's not for me.
Yeah, but I'm glad you served. Thank you for serving and helping your community. Oh,
you're welcome. I did it for just a short time. I ended up had a lot of injuries and had a buddy of mine who was making significantly more money than I was at the time, and not putting his body and life on the line. So I'm glad I made that choice too. And so I want to thank you, Rose, for joining. Let me, everybody, her information is in the description. Make sure you go and subscribe. When do you plan on going live again, or any of those things?
I actually have a live schedule for tomorrow morning. I'm coming on with a couple of my subscribers and a live stream. It's going to be Idaho 4. What? Or is that? I feel like we're getting feedback.
We might. Let me mute this. Does that work?
Let me talk. Oh yeah, that's much better. I'm sorry, Daniel.
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry. I have a live schedule for tomorrow morning with 2 other creators and subscribers of mine, and we're talking about criminal profiling. We're also talking about the ladder as a piece of evidence, and we're going to show a few crime scene photographs when we talk about the ladder. Could it have been used in this crime, and if yes, how? So it's just a discussion because it's been coming up recently, and one of the people anyway, so that's my most recent live stream tomorrow, and I'd love to see any of you there.
Yes, go check it out. It's go look for it's the to find her, just put up @official Swamp Rose on the search tab in your YouTube, and you'll be able to get there. Link is also here. We're at 9. She's at 9.59. Let's get her really close to 10K if we can get her there. 712 camera. I've heard about this camera. I've heard that this is the camera that captures Bryan Kohberger allegedly trying to park in front of the house.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's the most high definition picture of it I've seen, but I also have a couple other alleged grainy, pictures of it too. So that one has a really clear shot into the front yard. And the one thing that when you read that PCA on page 6, there's this line where it says that the car almost parked, and then tried to turn around and then gave up on the maneuver and kept going. And that camera, if that happened, when you look at the street view, you would see. I actually have the street view right here. Hold on, that camera would 100% pick up on it.
If you want to share it, I can pull it up.
Oh yeah, maybe I thought I had it right here. Sorry about that. But anyway, the street view it's really impressive. So if the 712 cam is there, then it will have a direct view of the front of the house, and it would have a direct view of the Elantra. And that's why it takes your breath away when you think there isn't a clear view of the car, because in my mind, I'm assuming there are better images, and I'm assuming that that's going to come out in trial. But it's confusing listening to all this analysis if they're just, in the lost and the haven't found. And you have to really spend a lot of time listening carefully to these hearings.
Well, I would look at the differences between the 2013 and the 2015 Elantra. And when you're looking at the 2015 Elantra, you got to look at the base model. And that's the one that he has. He doesn't have the bells and whistles. He has the base one. And you can tell because in the traffic stop, he doesn't have an infotainment center. He's got the most basic thing in the middle there. So, when I looked up the models that they had, this one doesn't have GPS capabilities or any of those type of things. But when you have a base model, you're probably going to be missing some of those extra features like fog lights and things like that. And if those were the things that were used to determine, the year of the vehicle, and they said, hey, this one doesn't have a fog light, then it's probably a 2011 or 13. I mean, that would make sense, because 2015s, maybe perhaps most of them did, except for the base model. I don't know. But I did see a difference in the cars in the 2015 between the base model and the more luxurious model. As far as wheels, also, I think they had different wheels. Headlights, I think, were different. The makeup of it. And I think that there was some fog lights also that were added to it. So, I would look at those things. I'm not a car expert in that manner, so I couldn't tell you for sure if one thing was shady or not from that.
I never even thought of that, Daniel, but that's actually pretty good, because we do know it was a base model, and the fog lights alone, that changes the way I analyze the two pictures. So that was really insightful. I will have to look up the difference between the base model, the stock model, the base model, and like the standard, I guess you would call it. Interesting.
Yeah. It's it'll be interesting once we see all the footage they have, everything that's gone down, and we see all the evidence. I think that it's like, I know a little bit more, and I'll tell you after the show, that might come up or should come up. And if those things are true, I don't know. I think they got their guy. But I appreciate you coming on. Tomorrow you're having a live. Make sure, guys, you go check her out. Go like, subscribe, do the whole 9 yards. Make sure you're liking, subscribing here on this one. I think we're done. I think that's a wrap. Everybody have a great night.